dumped into the airline
Then they,
out of
while
Grand
it was
Rapids.
going, they
But
turned the
that-
fire hydrant on.
Sooner or later, all that stuff's gonna
Holy
end.
mackerel.
Sure.
Property owners access.
If the
That's gonna
Inman
be
family
water
did that
out
for
of
us.
That would be my
existing
bet.
system.
There you
Yeah.
go.
See how many flights I could buy with what's left.
Well, they might be
cents per
tanking,
flight.
but
Larry,
Or
everyone's
using
seen
open
this.
mechanism.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass it around, and I don't know if Ross has seen
then
it.
they're hooked up.
I never see him tank, and I see him doing some excavating
Well, it's up
there.
in the hills there.
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna
I
do
see
it.
they got the site all clear.
That orange, he's gonna be right up like a Christmas tree
They
on
never
that
dug a hole
orange.
for it until they were excavating today.
Tigers tried to lose one last night.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw it. Thank you.
I think we're, yeah.
No one wants it.
It can go back.
Everybody seen it?
I think everybody.
I just wanna make sure everybody got to see that.
Yeah, I don't know, I couldn't figure out what happened the other day.
It's awful hard to
Get it to
This
them.
idea of pulling the pitch.
All right, I'll make sure.
Because he's 120 pitches.
How are you?
Yeah.
Hey, Al,
He told me.
welcome.
Could you introduce yourself? I don't think we've seen you for a while.
There's a seat over here.
You can get your name tag out.
He is the chief
All right,
Law
we're gonna start in
enforcement
about
officer for
30
Grand Traverse
seconds and
County.
stop this foolishness.
Presently,
Oh, come on.
You missed the better part of the
Oh,
whole.
no, I didn't miss the foolishness.
You're lit up tonight. Look at
Where
that.
I've been all day, Foolishness was all around us.
That is a bright color.
What's that?
I said that is a
said
bright
bright
color.
There's 2 days,
This is my
you
retro
smiled.
tiger shirt.
I see.
there's 2 days you smile
hard
at
to get Cooper
when you're a
Star
prosecutor. The day you get elected and the day you leave.
All right, I'd like to call the August meeting of the Grand Traverse County Public Health and Safety Committee to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sam, if you'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fleece.
Present.
Wait, which one am
It was in
I?
between,
I barely heard a squeak.
Max Bauer.
Here.
Thomas.
Yep.
Richardson.
Here.
Lemkool.
here,
Henschel.
Yes.
Inman.
here.
Gilman.
Here.
Chairman Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the July 6th meeting.
Move for approval.
Support.
Motion by Richardson, supported by Fleece to approve the minutes as provided. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. This brings us to our first opportunity of public comment. We do have 2 public comment sessions scheduled this evening. Sam will read the rules for the first session.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once in the same manner, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
Having heard the rules, is there anyone wishing to make public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move forward. We have a second opportunity later in the agenda. The approval of the agenda, are there any additions to the agenda, Dennis?
Move for approval as presented.
Support.
Motion by Inman, supported by Henschel to approve the agenda as provided. Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. No special order of business. That brings us to the actions on the consent calendar. The clerk will read the consent calendar, please. I know, we're moving right along.
That's great.
We're going to be out of here.
Purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. Receive and file Community Corrections monthly reports for June, Commission on Aging monthly report for June, Northern Lakes 2010 annual report. For approval, PAO fiscal year 2012 cooperative reimbursement program agreement, application and acceptance, Healthy Futures renewal agreement, a lease agreement renewal for Kingsley Adolescent Health Center, and the Michigan Department of Community Health. CPBC Amendment Number 3.
Having heard the consent calendar, is there anyone in the audience wishing to have any item removed? Any member of the board?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion by Limcool, supported by Henschel. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Max Bauer,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Richardson,
Yes.
Lemkool.
Yes.
Henschel,
Yes.
Inman,
Yeah.
Gilman,
Aye.
Fleece,
Yes.
Chairman Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. Department action items. The first item is the prosecuting attorney's office manager proposal. I assume that's why we got him out from behind his desk to be here this evening.
Thanks for the invitation.
Buried in files.
You're always welcome now.
Thank you. My office manager, Sherry McNamara, just happens to be a paralegal. It's not required for her position.
You could move one of those microphones over closer. There you go.
Got it?
The guy in the department's flagging us.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we've taken advantage of that situation. It's a coincidence. Sherry acts as essentially the FOIA coordinator for this board and all of its departments, for the sheriff, and for the other elected officials. She reviews approximately 900 FOIA requests a year. She screens them, and if there is something that appears to be exceptionally controversial, brings them to Bob Cooney or myself. When the Siegel study was done, they couldn't find a comparative position which included an office manager and paralegal FOIA coordinator, because there isn't any. I am not interested in creating such a position. I think in the future, there may be more of a need for more managerial and computer skills and that sort of thing as opposed to this. But we have a situation now where I believe Sherry McNamara is being underpaid as an office manager since she's undertaken these paralegal duties. So my proposal is this: I'd like to get together with Human Resources, do a study of paralegal salaries like they did with, like Siegel did with the other positions, and find out if there is a differential between, and I believe there is, between the salary which would be paid for paralegal and an office manager. Take the percentage of time that Sherry McNamara devotes to FOIA coordination, FOIA review, and implement that differential, and I believe it'll result in an increase of salary. Certainly it would be something less than $5,000, but I think it's only fair that she at least get this consideration. That's my pitch.
Dennis, I think we probably want to hear from you and Jen as to this request.
Jen and I have been talking about this to determine, not this particular position, but we've talked with you and we've talked many times about how we're going to handle things in our wage and salary system now that we've made a decision to put the Siegel study in abeyance. Okay. For those commissioners who may not be familiar, we have had a wage and salary system in this county for 30 years. And that system is set up on the premise that employees will be treated fairly when they're assessed against internal equity and for external equity. So internally, one position against another, externally against a market of similar sized counties with jobs with similar traits. And historically, what has happened is there's always been a mechanism in the wage and salary system that allowed an employee whose job changed in some substantial way, either in an area of responsibility, not in quantity of work, but in area of responsibility, work environment. There's a whole list of criteria that they had the ability to come in and petition HR to reevaluate the position based on the new level of responsibility, and that job could be reweighted and could be compensated at the new level if in fact it was undercompensated. I'm going to switch gears here and I'm going to use a current example that exists with us right now. That is, Georgia Durga, our Commission on Aging Director. Okay. Georgia is under a salary system like everyone else, and this year she has taken over responsibility for a senior center operation. 4 more employees, another $500,000 of expense, implementing a whole new system and coordinating and bringing it into the county system. Right now, I'm Lazelle. I'm pretty sure she should be entitled to more compensation because of the additional responsibility. But right now, we don't have a mechanism for that. That mechanism went on hold when the county board decided 4 years ago, 5 years ago, to go and do the Siegel study. At that time, we probably had, and I'm going from memory here, Jen hasn't looked it up for me yet, we probably had 60 to 70 requests in to have from employees who wanted their jobs reevaluated. Okay, that was one of the real strong indicators to say the system we had, which was 15 years old, 18 years old, was starting to get outdated. People get used to how the system works. They kind of know where the points are. They know what they have to, the right things to say. And all these jobs were being reevaluated. You said, all right, we need to reevaluate the whole system. And that's when we went out and did Siegel. So we had a moratorium on any reviews of these positions. So we had these, 60, let's say 70 positions that were looked at the time. Siegel came in and did a study, looked at those positions, reevaluated redid the job descriptions for all county positions, and then came up with a set of recommendations. And in some cases, they recommended some of those 60 or 70 positions be increased in pay. In some, they said no, they should be left the same. They may even have, and I don't recall, but they may even have said some should be downgraded. But the county board wrestled with the Siegel system, and then finally this year said we're putting a moratorium on. Secondly, so that's one issue. The second issue is during this last 5 years, other jobs have changed significantly, and I use Georgia Durgas as an example. And so there are positions that have changed responsibility here over the last 4 years, and they have not been reevaluated in terms of what the level of responsibility is. So we had a system that was in place for 20, 25 years, where the culture of this county was, we're going to pay people fairly. If your job changes substantially or significantly, it will be reevaluated. We put that on hold 5 years ago for very specific and legitimate reasons, and we've done nothing with those positions since then. So what Al presents to you is typical, maybe a little bit different in its makeup, but it's typical of what we have with a large number of employees that we're told at the time, we'll do this, we'll review it, and then we'll eventually be able to take care of it. Now that we've made a decision to put Siegel on hold indefinitely, the question is, are we back at the old system? Do we start reevaluating these positions under the old system? Or because of the economic conditions we're in, are we not doing any reevaluations and our positions staying where they are? Jen and I have been talking about this, and we were planning to bring a recommendation. Al brought this issue to the forefront, and departments have been talking to me about this for the last 4 years. And we've been saying, hold off till we find out what's happening with Siegel. This was opportune from the standpoint that it got the issue before you. It just happened to be a week or two before Jen and I were going to be ready to kind of propose something to you. So I hope that kind of is fairly clear. I know it sounds complicated, but what we have now is really a question of, are we going to continue that culture of evaluating positions when the responsibilities change and put them in the old system since Siegel is on hold, or are we not going to do anything with that? Now, again, to complicate it a little further, Siegel evaluated that when they redid job descriptions. We took it all the way to the point where Siegel made their recommendations. But for those commissioners who were here, at that time when we were thinking about adopting Siegel, you said, all right, those who want to appeal what Siegel said, we'll have a mechanism to have those reviewed too. So even though we haven't adopted Siegel, we're using Siegel job descriptions, which could include duties that they weren't compensated for under the old system. And we haven't given those an opportunity to be reviewed. So, just in my rough estimate, for example, I met with Georgia Durga today, the Commission on Aging, and Commissioner Maxbauer, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this. I believe they still want Georgia's position reevaluated. They want the home chore workers reevaluated. the aides evaluated. They've got 30 or 40 people in their department alone that they feel need to be reevaluated, that they've been telling us consistently for 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
They should be reevaluated. I'm guessing conservatively, we have 100 to 120 or 130 positions that are going to be in a position that if you say today or next week or the end of the month, we are going to use the old wage system, but we're going to go back and reevaluate. Within, a week or two, Jen will have 120 or 130 of those on her desk asking for reevaluation. So it's quite a dilemma. But the bottom line is, these employees who hired into a system, we've discontinued the system. We've changed the rules for the last 5 years.
Well, I guess the other things that I'd add is I can go back even a little bit further to where we had employee reevaluation committee where employees came in and they petitioned to commissioners to have their job classification changed. And that was a real rat race trying to figure out how we were supposed to evaluate the point system and all of that. And I think the one thing that, I know Siegel is an awfully dirty word with a lot of people, but I think the one thing that we've truly seen in that system is if we had a huge discrepancy, it was in what I'm going to call middle management positions, these supervisor positions, and those were the people that were specifically significantly underpaid according to that study. Not saying the study's completely valid or it's completely invalid, but the fact is it was very obvious from that study those were the places that we were severely deficient. So, I know that, at least from my perspective, we've said a long time, we're going to have good help, or we're going to have good employees, and we're going to pay them for what they do. So we do need to figure out a way to compensate people for what they're doing. If we're not able to do that, then we probably shouldn't be doing that service.
Although we haven't formalized any kind of recommendation in my discussions with our HR director, Jen Seaman, we see two options here, really, basically. Since Siegel is on hold, option one is use the old wage and salary system and start, again, reevaluating positions under the old system of compensation, okay? But go through and reevaluate these positions that such as Al's office manager, where he feels they're incorrectly placed. That's one choice, assuming that Siegel's indefinitely on hold. The second option is, because of economic conditions or whatever, you just say, no, we're not going to evaluate anything. All positions will stay where they are. We can't afford to do anything. That obviously causes morale issues, causes inequity in pay. On the other side of the coin, if you say, yes, go evaluate, that causes, a flood of, 100 or more requests into HR that will take, we haven't even talked about it, but I'm guessing 6 months or more to get through. So that's kind of the only choices we see. There may be others that you folks are aware of, and we sure would like to hear them.
Well, here's how I see it, is that the criticism, I believe, from the process that the county agreed to use with Siegel was that we agreed back then to go with larger county comparisons and then do a discount factor, which the local human resource people did not like. And they also felt we should have used a stronger percentage of local job comparisons within the study. So those were the two indicators I believe that they came out with the recommendation.
Well, Commissioner, if I could clarify that a little
Yes.
bit. What they said was, for a number of positions, and they were primarily clerical positions, that the market should be a local market that's compared to private sector and public sector.
Okay.
They said there were another group of employees that were, I'm going to call them, for lack of a better word, paraprofessional employees, and they said they should be compared on a statewide basis. And then there were management employees, I believe. They said they should be compared on a national basis, which we didn't agree with.
Right.
So.
Okay. And I think they left us with kind of a final report that, I don't know exactly, but I believe it was, go back, a lot of the work has already been done in terms of the position descriptions and those kinds of things. And at some point in time, we had directed Jen, just as she came on board, to go back and start working on amending or adjusting that Siegel plan to fit the recommendation from the human resource group that came in and did the evaluation, which would have been a lot of work, a lot of time commitment. At the same time, we were doing the healthcare bids and the agent of record, and at the same time, we were doing, then we made that decision, and then there was the transition from the Priority Health to Blue Care Network, which took up a lot of her time and the time of the people in the human resource area. So there was a concern there, and I think that was brought to our board, and we said, we can't slam everything to her. She just got on board. Let's put Siegel on hold for, number one, those reasons, and the other two is we don't know what the next year budget's going to look like in the following year's budget. So we're just going to put this process on hold. So I sort of was left with the feeling that we were going to, in the interim, evaluate questions regarding compensation to the system that we had in place, which was the point system. But maybe I misunderstood that. So I guess as a suggestion that I have is that we continue to not put our time and resources into trying to fix something that obviously other personnel people felt was done improperly. And I guess my preference would be, if we're going to do anything, is to reevaluate the counties that fit within our population market. And I know that those over time have changed, but I know that we had, I don't know how many dentists that we've always picked, 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, has always been, the high and the low, and we were in the medium in terms of population. There was, so we were always kind of like in the middle or the upper half, and in our comparisons in population with counties around Michigan. And then we did a comparison with them, with their human resources department, as to what the pay was, and that gave us an idea on a high and low range based on population of where those dollar amounts were. And that was the main indicator, and I don't know if we did at that point in time a lot of local comparisons. So I think we should do something. I don't think we should just do nothing. I think that at a minimum, maybe we can go back and reestablish our population market compared to a certain number of counties that you want to pick out of a hat. It doesn't matter to me, as long as it's a broad representation, and check on some local comparisons as best as possible, and then come back at a certain point in time and just say, this is the system we're going to use to compare. And I think it would be more reflective on what actually the comparisons should be, rather than trying to amend the Siegel study that went with some kind of discount factor and try to mesh that with a local comparison. So I'm not saying that this should be done like immediately, but I think over time, I think that we should be heading in that direction. What do we do with certain positions that we don't have a handle on in terms of a comparison? I mean, I'd probably go back to some of these counties and say, do you have, it's probably been a while since we've contacted some of these counties. I'd ask them, do you have a position that's similar in this nature, and can you give us some data on it?
Jason? Do you have something that was immediately?
Well, thank you. What I was going to say was, what you just expressed is really twice what I was talking about. There's the internal equity, which would be the piece that we start comparing Sherry with her responsibilities to the other people in this county. And then there's the external market, and that is a huge amount of work. And the market that we were using before Siegel was pretty traditional. We were trying to get away from that, but basically what we did is we used assessed value, or no, taxable value, and we used population. We merged the two graphs and we put them in the middle. We put ourselves in the middle, and we had a pretty decent market. So I guess if we were going to do that, my suggestion, at least initially, would be not to mess around with the market. My suggestion would be to look at it internally and fix things internally under the old system. And then down the road someday, a year or two from now, go evaluate the market, because the market affects everybody. If you just go out and look at certain positions in the market, then everybody else who you didn't look at ends up saying, well, wait, what about me? I should be looked at in the new market too.
Well, I guess the only question I have on that is that I'm cool with the classification, if I understand you correctly, stay with the current point system, all right, to determine where you're at. The only other issue is, since we've gained population over 10,000 over the last 10 years, and the last time we did an assessment on counties that are within our population range, those numbers would change. So it seems to me we'd keep the same system, but we would just go back to a different set of numbers in terms of county comparisons.
I'm just
Am I
saying,
off, am I
that-
way off
no,
or what?
That would be the ideal way to do it. It's just
Okay.
it's a very
It's a tough thing, 'cause you-
extreme amount of work,
'cause
because
you
then you're
got
calling each of those
counties and get them
You gotta check all
motivated.
the jobs, you have to verify, it would be twice the work.
All right.
Jason?
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, this is a union position, right?
No.
No, this is not a union position, okay. And we do perform evaluations though, right? I mean, your office performs
I
a...
think and I don't blame Dennis for piggybacking on my proposal and bringing the other issues to the board's attention, but I really want to differentiate my proposal from what's being discussed here, because I am not asking for a reclassification, a reevaluation of office manager position. In fact, the Prosecuting Attorneys Association does its own survey. I have all of those numbers for prosecutors' offices, and Sherry McNamara's position of office manager, salary for which she is paid, is not out of line. I'm not here asking for that. She's doing something other than office manager. And I don't think it's unprecedented that someone who's doing something else other than her job be compensated therefore. I think Jean Durenzi, isn't that wasn't she? I'm not sure.
She was, for a while there, we did that. She
No,
had
that's what I'm saying.
two jobs.
She had different jobs.
I've seen that study, in fact, I've seen that study from the Prosecutors Association.
Did you see where Midland County, when we were once even, myself and Mike Carpenter, Midland County, his salary has eclipsed mine and he doesn't even do civil work? I hope it's so.
Well, I saw that Marquette is high, and we're pretty high in some things too, but the thing is, if we do evaluation and she's doing more, but I have a couple other questions though too. We have how many prosecutors right now? I mean,
5.
We have 5 prosecutors.
5 assistants.
5 assistants in this side. Now, what she's doing paralegal work.
Right.
If she was not doing the paralegal work, what would she be doing? I mean, who would be doing that?
We'd be doing that, and we'd need more than 5 prosecutors. You know, it's interesting. You know, the Sheriff's Department, since 1990, has increased sworn officers by 70%, and we're at 1990 figures for assistant prosecutors. Think about that.
Now, has your department done any, a lot of times, for example, I mean, I've been in jobs
You
where...
just took away one of my assistants last year.
That's true.
We're buried. And if Sherry doesn't do this work, somebody else is going to do it, and you're going to pay for it.
Okay. The different jobs that I've had, okay, we've had, you go to, everybody compares their salary to somebody else's. Has she done any comparison to what she's doing in there at all? Has anybody in the office said, you know what, and like you say, you've done it, Midland, hey, he's eclipsing your own. Has anybody done this? I mean, we're talking about going back and looking at a study here.
But that's not what I propose.
I understand. I'm just saying, where does she think she belongs?
We're okay with the classification of office manager and the salary that she's being paid. What we're not okay with, she's doing another job at and she should be paid as a paralegal. I'm asking for a differential. Paralegals get paid more than office managers in this community.
Could you not then, outside of it being being that it is not a union position, could you not, as it is your department, create that special position without too much trouble?
Are you going to pay someone to fill that position?
Well, the reason I say that is because, as Dennis has pointed out, there's going to be 100 more behind this if the same classification, if something isn't created that creates that socket for the higher level of pay, there's going to be 100 more with the same classification going, say, I want my pay rate.
maybe not.
Let's be clear.
Maybe not.
Al's trying to draw a distinction here with his position. Now, in all due respect to Al, I guarantee you, I got 5 or 6 other departments that will be in here tomorrow if you let them, and they will be drawing why theirs is a distinction from the regular compensation system as well. But I understand what he's saying, because we did have a position. Jean Dorenzi was paid one salary when she was my administrative assistant for half-time, and half-time she was economic development or brownfield director, and she got paid a different salary for that, and that's what Al's asking for.
That's right.
Okay, but be clear, whether you solve Al's problem or not, that 100 request does not go away. Those are still there, and we still have to decide how we're going to deal with them. Solving Al's issue in a different way does not change that. That's still all there, and we got to figure out a way to do it.
What was it, can you repeat the recommendation that you had?
My proposal is this, is that Sherry McNamara's time spent as FOIA coordinator. You're designee, by the way. You're the FOIA
Yes.
coordinator for the county by law.
Thank you.
She's doing your job.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, anyway, 20 to 25% of her time, 900 requests a year,
Right.
spent as a paralegal reviewing FOIA requests. And by the way, since she's been doing that, we haven't been sued, like we had in the past. So anyway, that's, what I'm looking for is to use that percent of her time, find the differential between office manager and paralegal, and she get paid that extra compensation. There'd be an asterisk in the job, that if you act as paralegal FOIA coordinator, you get this extra compensation. If you don't, because in the future, I'm not sure what requirements are going to be, needed for the office manager. I don't want to create a new position. I'm just saying it's only fair that somebody who just by coincidence happens to have a paralegal degree
Right.
is doing extra work, which is not being compensated.
So do you have a recommended stipend increase, or do you want human resources to do that evaluation?
Well, I think we should get together and see what we come up with.
I mean,
Okay.
Al has always been supportive of running all this through human resources, so I'm sure that's the way we would do it. And I understand exactly what he's saying, and I don't really disagree. I will tell you, at the time when we were having trouble with FOIA issues, and this is a side note for new commissioners, well, he does 900 of these.
Sure.
How many thousands does a sheriff have that are the routine ones, insurance
But
and
we
everything?
we do 4 a day for the sheriff, okay, because he only does the easy ones.
Yeah, my point was, he's talking about 900. We probably have 3,000 or 4,000 FOIAs a year, just so you know. That's how many Freedom of Information requests we get. So at the time, we were having a problem. We got sued. And I went to Al, and I said, Al, you're the FOIA coordinator. And he goes, no, I'm not. The chairman of the board's the FOIA coordinator. But in a spirit of cooperation, Al says, listen, I'll do this. We'll use Sherry, and we'll do this. And we said, okay, because he bailed us out. Otherwise, we'd have to train somebody and have somebody dedicated to doing this kind of work. So it has worked out very well for us. But I think he did it, and Sherry did it, fully anticipating that there would be some compensation for it. And that just didn't happen because of all these other things that went on. So I have no problem with what Al's proposing, and I have no problem with working with Jen to come up with it if you agree. But please, this does not end the conversation. I got 100 people waiting there, and I know Commission on Aging is going to be writing you a letter here in the next couple of days saying, please reevaluate these positions. I've been in budget hearings for the last 2 weeks, and I've had at least 6 departments, including the probate court and the circuit court, say, when are we going to reevaluate these positions that I've been waiting for 4 years? I just got the information from probate court today saying, here's the classifications that we were looking at and that you haven't done anything with in 4 years. So I'm just telling you, please, whatever we do with Al, we still have to deal with this other issue. We have to come up with some decision on it. Chris?
Well, first of all, Al, I was opposed in last year's budget to cutting back one assistant prosecutor in your department. And I wish you had filled out the little form for us as we're doing our priorities. Had you been on the list, I would have given you 3s. I don't think that it's a good idea to have the ability to arrest and charge people and not have the proper prosecutors to take it to the next level. That having been said, I am absolutely in support of your suggestion, and I think doing nothing, in my opinion, is not an option. I understand that you're in budget hearings, and now is not the time you want to hear this. But to me, doing nothing is not an option. I do believe that Sherry McNamara deserves to be fairly compensated for what she's doing. If those FOIA requests went out to a paralegal contracting, it's going to cost us more money. In my opinion, I think we need to agree to go back to the old point system until such time, because I do believe that our employees need to be treated fairly. And, you know, I know budget times are hard, and, you know, maybe we're going to have to, maybe we're not going to have as many positions next year in certain departments. But the employees that we do have that are doing work, such as being done in Al's department, they deserve to be fairly compensated. So I would support going back to the old point system, and Dennis Aloya is exactly right. The Commission on Aging Board has been waiting and waiting and waiting, and a letter is going to be coming.
Ross?
Well, let's try to take it one step at a time. First of all, I'd like to make a motion that Al Schneider, meet with Jen Seaman and Dennis Aloya if necessary to reevaluate Sherry McNamara's position and bring a recommendation back to this board.
Support.
Okay, and then before we vote on that motion, Dennis, you mentioned that you and Jen have been working on coming up with some sort of recommendation on how to deal with these situations.
Yes.
And that's going to be happening fairly soon.
We can probably have it ready for RMA next week.
Okay.
We've been talking about it for about 3 weeks.
Okay, well, and Commissioner Maxwell may be right. The best thing we could do might be to go back to the point system, but if you're that close to a recommendation, I think we should at least listen to your recommendation before we take any other action on anything.
I think that's fine, and we can have it to you soon.
I think, at least from my perspective, obviously, Al's request is one that's before us, but it's not going to be the only one we see. But the fact that we have not evaluated any of these positions for 5 years is not acceptable either. So, I think we need to move forward with this, these are not the greatest economic times, we all know that, but the fact is we still have to compensate our people properly for what they're doing. So, I have a motion on the floor and a second. Further discussion, Herb?
Yeah, John, I would hope that when you and Dennis get together, that you would make a recommendation as to what type of system we would look at for evaluating employees. Whether it is the point system or whether there's another way of doing it. I mean, for the last 5 years, things have changed dramatically. My other big concern is that in all the time that we've sat here and looked at doing our plan for the year, I've never seen this come up on our plan that I can recall that says this is a priority that we should be having our people working on. And also, we just did a survey amongst all of us, and I don't remember seeing it on our survey.
It wasn't, prosecutor's office was on there.
And I'm just concerned that when we put out a survey and we don't have something like this put in there, that we don't have that ability to rank it, to talk about how we should be looking at this and where we should do it. My other concern is that with these tough budgets, when we start doing this, then we have to start cutting back someplace else.
Yes.
And I'm very, very concerned about that. I think that we're going to have more and more of a hard time trying to provide the services that we need to provide for the people from the community if we look at doing any kind of dramatic increase. If I remember correctly, the Siegel study was going to cost us $1.3 million, and we were going to try and do it in 2 steps.
Well, remember, we're not
We're not
talking
going to
about
try and do
Siegel
that.
study anymore. If we go under
Yeah.
the old point system, we're going to evaluate those 80-plus positions, whatever they are, based under the old point system, and change where there's a change necessary and not change otherwise.
So I just, I don't want to get tied down into the point system if there's a better way to be able to doing it. And so that's my biggest concerns.
Rob?
Could you read the motion, please?
It was for Al, Jen, and Dennis to review Sherry's position and bring a recommendation back to the board.
Okay, so we're going to vote on a motion to have people get together to talk about a position, and then next week, we're going to consider a proposal on how to get together and talk about positions. It seems kind of redundant to me that we're going to have them go get together, and then next week...
They're going to talk about that specific.
We're talking about two different
No, this
things.
specific.
This is two different
This
deals.
is a specific position that they're.
And they're talking about,
To review
they're talking
Sherry's
about a
position and bring a
classification plan.
recommendation back to the board.
They're talking about a classification plan he's going to come back with.
The classification plan, help me out, what is that?
The classification plan is, it's our point factor, so we have a point factor system that jobs are evaluated on. They're given points for various factors, which is considered it to be in our point factor classification plan.
It could be education, it could
It's the
be
level.
Education,
tasks.
experience, job impact.
Responsibility,
There's
work environment, there's...
like probably about 10 different areas. And after a department fills out a job analysis questionnaire, also called the JAQ, we then look at it and evaluate it based upon those different areas. So there's different levels or different points that are given for a high school diploma, for an associate's degree, for a bachelor's degree, for a master's. There's points associated with those. So you go through each area, add up the points, and you get a total.
Okay, and will that system include doing extra work such as the FOIA coordinator? Or
No.
The
Or
FOIA
George's
coordinator,
position?
kind of two different things, because Al is asking for the FOIA coordinator to be on top of the office manager, but in the future, they might not be doing the office manager may not be doing the FOIA coordinator, so in essence, that stipend would go away.
I hate to say this, but he actually, this makes sense. what
Yes.
he's suggesting.
It does.
He's a lawyer, you know?
Where,
No, it really does, because we have 5 or 6 other office managers.
yes,
None of them do FOIA work,
correct.
Right.
okay? So to evaluate the office manager position, you evaluate the position. So if you look at that position and you change it and you raise it for some reason, you have to either decide it's a different position, so it actually makes more sense to compensate it for the office management responsibility and then compensate it separately for the FOIA responsibility.
Well, the other piece of that is, a year from now, when Sherry decides to retire, the new person that fills that office manager's position is not qualified or has no desire to
Potentially
do
not,
it.
right.
Then all of a sudden, you're stuck with the compensation for the position. So it makes more sense to talk about a stipend to be added to her salary
Yeah.
for the additional responsibilities.
And what did we do before she took over the FOIA?
We got sued.
Well, yeah, the sheriff was, let me put it this way, the chairman of the Board of Commissioners is the FOIA coordinator for the commission and all of its departments. Each elected official is their own FOIA coordinator. Myself, the sheriff, the clerk, the treasurer. Courts are not part of FOIA. So I'm my own FOIA coordinator. The sheriff is his own FOIA coordinator, but we're doing that for him.
So we were getting inconsistent, we were making inconsistent response to FOIAs. Now everything is very consistent. They review them all if there's an issue, so we don't have one elected official, saying, well, I'm going to give them everything, more than what they require, and someone else saying, I'm not messing with that. Everything's being addressed in an appropriate
And
manner.
the time constraints were also a problem.
Time constraints were a problem.
Well,
when I was
in health department, for example,
received them in my office.
has some sensitive requests. We just
Yep.
got one today that Sherry and I reviewed together, because when she looked at it, she wasn't, there might be some controversy here. The health departments are the most controversial.
Dick?
Are you charging for the FOIA request?
We charge what the statute allows,
Okay.
which is not much.
Well,
Which isn't much.
some people probably wouldn't do it if they thought they had to pay.
Larry?
Al, help me with this. I believe that when Ross was the county administrator, that they were the general government FOIAs were centralized and sent to his office, and him and his staff, administrative staff, tried to respond to those things, and then it got to the point where it got so overwhelming, we ended up at some point in time getting it over to your office.
I'm not sure.
I think that's how it went down, but.
That was before his time, too.
We still coordinate all the non-elected FOIAs through our office. But, we don't have the expertise to make decisions on those things. And, 15 years ago or so, wasn't that big of a deal. Today, it's a real big deal.
Right, I didn't believe that. Okay.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to authorize the prosecutor, the human resources director, and the county administrator get together and bring forth to the county board of commissioners a recommendation in regard to the specific position of FOIA coordinator being done by the county prosecutor's office manager. Are we all in agreement? That's the motion? Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Thanks, Al.
All right, thanks, Al.
Central Dispatch. Mr. Torrey.
A simple page or a simple request?
Simplify the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this, Jason. I had a couple commissioners who were confused by the recommendation.
Thanks
so
for
I
coming,
asked them to
Jen.
redo this.
Jason Torrey, Central Dispatch. We brought you an agenda item today just to outline a few things on radio communications, our grant process that we're currently undergoing with the PSIC grant, and give you an update on our FCC mandate for narrowbanding. That's been addressed here, and I can comment on that if you have any questions. But specifically, we want to get on top of a few things that need to be taken care of to continue on with the PSIC grant process. And that is the data radio equipment. In 2006, we purchased or were awarded a grant to purchase data radio equipment, which was the foundation for implementing the MDT system. That has since been replaced with the air cards through AT&T, and that data radio equipment is basically obsolete, and we need to get it off of that tower. We received three quotes of $4,200, $2,800, and then actually a proposal from Telrad to remove it at no cost to the county as long as they could take control and possession of the equipment. Now, I included the cost of the equipment in 2006. We did extensive looking to find a possible buyer of this equipment considering the cost in 2006. However, it's like trying to sell a rotary phone today. It's not on the market. It's not marketable. The transmission lines are usually not salvageable for reuse. They usually use them for scrap. Basically what we found is that the cost to remove the equipment would be more than what it's worth. The Telrad, as you can see in their proposal, is doing a good faith gesture to try and work some bid work back out of our maintenance costs that we undergo every year in Central Dispatch. There are probably a handful of folks in the state that could use some of those modems. I can tell you that they were approximately $3,600 a piece back in 2006. However, today you can go on eBay and buy 5 of them for $80. So that tells you the depreciation that's occurred over the last 5 years. So we have a recommendation here to approve the offer from Telrad to remove the data radio equipment, including their antenna transmission lines in the Paragon base station from Central Tower so that we can continue with the PSIC grant. That is our first request, and then the second is in conjunction with that, the PSIC grant is going to, in essence, in the end, going to require quite a few microwave dishes to be erected on Central Tower to communicate with various other sites in the county. That will require a load analysis to make sure that that Central Tower site is capable of handling the load. And we have Municipal Services Consulting, that is handling the PSIC grant for Region 7. They are, give us a budgetary estimate of $3,000 to $4,000 to conduct that load analysis. That load analysis can only be done by the engineering manufacturer of the tower, which is Pyrod. And we would want to work with Municipal Consulting Services specifically because they are working with the region and working on this project for us and for the region, which is in itself a very complex, multi-county, multi-jurisdictional project. So we would recommend that we can authorize the use of current funding that's in our budget to conduct the load analysis on Central Tower.
Rob?
Move to approve the offer from Telerad to remove data radio equipment from the central tower and turn over possession of said equipment to them.
Support.
Okay. Motion by Henschel, supported by Max Bauer, to authorize Telrad to remove the data equipment, take possession of such in exchange for their services. Herb?
Yeah, don't we have to declare this surplus property before that? Shouldn't that be part of it, that we declare it surplus property and that we do it?
The purchasing policy authorizes myself to declare property surplus once it's been depreciated, and Dean says this has been depreciated, so I mean, in effect, it is declared surplus.
I just didn't know it should be part of the motion or something.
It does not need to be.
Okay.
Ross?
Jason, so what equipment will Telrad actually get out of this?
Anything related to basically the MDT wireless data communication system, which is 2 Bogner 800 megahertz antennas, the transmission lines, which are the coax that are erected on the tower to reach the antennas, and then the base station, okay, which is the data radio base station. It's the Paragon PD base station, which basically handles communications, okay?
Which we're not even using anymore, right?
No, we're not using any of this currently.
Okay.
It's just there. And then the modems that were in the cars. I did consult with the sheriff's office and the PD regarding the modems because they were in their vehicles and they're perfectly comfortable, have no ambition to use them in the future.
They're not in the cars now.
No, they're all out of the cars.
So what are we talking about, 50 or 60 modems?
Yeah, roughly, maybe even 70.
But they don't have any value.
No, they're sitting in a box at Telrad right now.
Okay.
You've got them all listed here, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's all listed on this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Further discussion? Rob?
Just curious, you said this stuff has to be removed. What if you just leave it there?
It's gonna affect the load on the tower so that when we continue on the PSIC grant and those different microwave dishes and antennas that are gonna have to go on that tower, it will affect that. So we have to get that equipment off in order to do the load analysis to make sure that the current process that we're going to undergo with the new equipment is safe enough to...
So we're currently paying electricity to power the equipment we're not using?
No, it's not operational.
Jason, when you say load, what does that mean? Weight?
The load factor, when you put antennas on the tower, it creates a factor with the wind and the weather. So you want to make sure that you're not overloading the tower.
It's wind and physical structure. Evaluation is what we have to get in the thing. And until that other stuff is taken off, we can't do any evaluation as to whether or not new equipment can be added to the tower.
Right.
One more question, Mr. Aloya. This is in your purview to declare this surplus? Did this really have to come before us, or could you have just said?
No, we wanted, sometimes we'll look at these things and make a decision that it needs to be before you. And the reason for this one is because, while typically bids give us a dollar amount, here we had a bid that was an exchange for equipment that was surplus. But still, because it was an exchange of equipment, we thought it was important to run it by you. But I support this recommendation. I think it makes sense.
Larry? Jason, the question I've got is, if this equipment's nearly worthless, why would Telrad be willing to, in effect, give us $2,800 for it?
Well, because, I mean, like I said, there are a handful of folks that are using this stuff. It's not manufactured or maintained by Data Radio anymore. Data Radio is essentially under a new umbrella. They have a new name and they're producing new equipment. However, there are a handful of people in the state that currently use this stuff. However, the Paragon PD base station that cost $18,500 in 2006, you can buy it for $300, or $200. Those modems, like I said, were $3,600 a piece, but you can buy 5 of them on eBay for $80. So I guess what I'm trying to do is save us $3,000, because yeah, you can take it all down for $3,000 and maybe sell it for $3,000, but I mean there's no sense in doing that when you can work with Telred and have them take it and deal with it.
My guess is what they're going to do is they have maintenance contracts with dispatch centers around the
Right.
state, and they're going to, people that have old equipment and stuff, they're going to trade this out, and they're going to say, I got that piece, I can fix it, and probably charge for it, and things like that.
Yeah.
I know, and I agree with that. But if you take all those pieces and you can buy them on eBay, say at a figure less than the 2,800, why would they do that? Not even good business sense.
Well, I mean, probably to service
I
their
think one piece of that,
customers.
Larry, is Telred wants to save our business. They still want to be our primary provider.
There's that
If
too,
you
I'm
read
sure
the
you're right.
letter again, you'll notice that they make a statement in there to that effect.
Pardon?
If you read the letter, I submitted that in the agenda item in the packet there, you'll notice that they make a statement to that effect. Because we had Telred, Central Dispatch specifically, had Telred as our maintenance provider for years until we rebid that. And Radio North, just a few years ago, submitted a much lower bid, and they were awarded the contract.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that, and I'm well aware of Telred, I'm well aware of Machuda's company, and that's why I asked that question, because it just doesn't make good business sense.
On their part.
On their part. And maybe they're trying to buy our business through the back door, if you will. And I remember the owner sitting right here in the audience, wanting that contract, and you look at what their price was versus Radio North, it was significant.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I think the point here is that if we look at price, it's significantly less this time.
And that maintenance contract that we submitted 2 years ago is going to expire in December of this year, and we intend to do another bid, put out another bid proposal, and seek bids from those same vendors. So I understand where you're coming from. I think they have a motive to do that, but obviously we have a policy in place to make those decisions with the board.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
All right, Mr. Chairman, do you also need a motion to authorize the use of
That was the
existing?
second piece. We also need to authorize the use of existing funds to conduct a load analysis on Central Tower.
All right, I'll make a motion to authorize the use of existing funds from line item radio repair and maintenance to conduct that load analysis on Central Tower.
Support.
Motion by Inman, supported by Richardson. Is there further discussion, Rob?
Is this one that has ever been done without a motion? I mean, has this process ever been done without a motion by this board? Because it's an item that's in your budget, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I guess what I want to ask is, once again, why is this before us if we've already put it in the budget to do it?
All right, well, we thought it was important to get that. We were going to bring this first item to the table, okay? And the PSIC grant is a big chunk of our ability to upgrade our radio communications. It's about a $200,000 enhancement that, with the hard match, will only cost Grand Traverse County $50,000. But it kind of goes hand in hand with this load analysis, and it was important that we brought it to you because we wanted to make sure that we'd have your support in understanding that the load analysis, even though it has to be done for the grant, is not part of the grant, it's supported by the grant. And I guess that brings up a good point that I should have mentioned earlier, is that it may have been a question of the board as to why the grant process wasn't paying for that. But the grant is only paying for the equipment and the installation of the equipment. However, this is a side effect to that which has to take place prior to that happening.
We certainly don't want to put $250,000 worth of equipment on the tower and then have it tip over.
Yep.
Larry?
Just a clarification for Rob, there are things that the board does label in certain categories in the budget, for example, capital improvements and those kinds of things. And it's been our protocol, once we establish that those funds should be dispersed, we do a vote of the board to disperse those funds.
Who's conducting the load analysis?
As I mentioned earlier, we would like to have support to have Municipal Services Consulting make the arrangements to conduct the load analysis. And the reason why is that they're doing all the consulting work for the PSIC grant and for the radio infrastructure upgrades through 6 counties in Region 7. And in order for us to, there's a complexity factor in this grant because of all the different pieces that are in place to make it work. And Leelanau County and Grand Traverse County are working together to form this interoperability. Now, the only folks that can actually conduct the engineering studies are PIROD. PIROD built it to manufacture the tower rather, so they're going to do the engineering studies. We want to work with Municipal Consulting Services because they're the consulting folks that are working with this grant process. The equipment through the grant is going to be a direct reflection of this load analysis.
Okay, thank you.
The consultant will coordinate it, but the manufacturer of the tower is responsible to conduct the study.
Right.
And they're the only ones authorized to do that study. We have a motion on the floor, seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Could I ask one more question?
Sure.
I had a couple of commissioners talk to me about kind of the future of this program. You know, we've been talking about the fact that I've asked you to put together, you know, the equipment request for upgrading the whole system to get to where we need to be to meet FCC certification, correct? Is that what's the right terminology? What do we?
Well, the FCC mandate for narrowbanding
Okay.
is the piece that has to be in place by the end of 2012.
All right. The question that I was asked by a commissioner, and I'd just like to have this discussion, is what if we don't do it?
Well, the warnings out there are significant fines. Significant fines. Now,
Fines.
to what extent significant means, I couldn't tell you. There's no dollar figure thrown out there. However, in our recent FCC updates at our different conferences that we attend, they say that they will significantly fine the
Would they have the
jurisdictions.
ability to close our dispatch center if they chose?
They can pull the license, yeah. And let me reiterate that when we go from wideband to narrowband, it's the spectrum of radio frequency that you're transmitting on. And so if we were to say no, and it interfered with our neighboring folks in terms of the transmissions, you can see where that would not probably set well with the FCC. And that's why they are imposing this and mandating it. And if you don't comply, they'll probably pull your license. They could pull your station, which is take you off the air, and they would find you.
Well, I don't think they'd take us off the air.
I don't
They
think
couldn't
they
afford the
would.
liability.
I agree with you. But if for some reason we have interference issues with neighboring counties or even a neighboring state, they would have a significant problem.
To that point, though, I mean, what's going on now? Are we interfering?
No, we're on what's a 25 megahertz spectrum now.
Okay.
So what they're doing is they're cutting that in half to 12 and a half. So everyone who runs on a VHF, very high frequency band, which is mostly public safety around the 153 megahertz range, has to narrow band, which means because they need more spectrum. They need more spectrum.
More
So they're
channels
going
for
to say you're going to cut it in half. You're going to cut the spectrum in half.
Pieces of the pie, but the pie doesn't get any
Right,
bigger is
right,
what it
right.
boils down.
And they actually have ambition someday to go to 6 1/4, but that's probably a 20-year plan.
I want to congratulate Jason on keeping this at our level in the discussion. Jason is really excellent. Technically, he knows this stuff back and forth, and usually he loses me in about 5 minutes, but he's learning that when he talks to me, he's got to keep it real simple, and you did a really good job today.
Thanks, Jason.
I could lose you when you talk about fishing.
Yeah.
All right, our next order of business
Did we
is,
vote on that motion?
Thanks, Jason.
Did we vote on the motion? We did.
yeah,
Yes, it carried.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
You tune us out, or?
Where you been?
okay,
All this conversation.
the next item on our agenda is the Septic Facility Finance Fund, or Fund.
And
We We have some information in our packet, I see.
I'm going to handle this for Dean.
Dean isn't here.
Unfortunately, Dean's aunt passed away,
Oh,
and
sorry
the
to hear that.
funeral was today.
Oh,
So
no.
I told Dean he had to take care of that, so
Second funerals.
you're stuck with me on this one. Two things. First of all, several weeks ago, we received a letter from the state indicating that we had needed to file a deficit reduction plan for the septic treatment plan. Every year, they look at our audits, and any place that they find a deficit exists, we're required under the law to file a deficit reduction plan. You see the letter on page 55, and it indicates a $246,000 deficit in that fund. There's a small one for 86 District Court. That one's already been cleared, and the state is fine with that. We received a letter saying that's okay. But we have to file a plan for this. In conjunction with that, you'll recall that I think 3 of the townships have paid their 50% of the shortfall from last year, and 2 did not. I believe the 2 that didn't were Elmwood and East Bay.
Okay.
Oh, wait, maybe I'm wrong.
I think it was Acme.
Maybe it was Acme.
Acme was holding.
Yeah, I'm sorry. 2 did not pay it. And that's been kind of up in the air, and we've been waiting. And their feeling is it should be paid through the settlement that was received, and all the $725,000 has now been accounted for. And so they're saying, let's pay it out of there, pay those townships back, pay the county back, and pay the shortfall out of that $725,000. I think we had some discussion on the board that if we got money from everybody up front, that would be great, and then we could carry this deficit out a little farther and carry us till we could redo the bonds. Because of this deficit plan, though, and the need to file with the state a response, Dean has evaluated this, talked with the state and talked with our auditors, and he too believes now that it's in our best interest to allow that $725,000 to be used to take care of this deficit at this point in time. That will be an acceptable deficit reduction plan for the state, so we will have cleared that. And that means that we would give the money back to Garfield and the other townships that paid. And so that is our recommendation, that we allow them to use this money to pay their part of the deficit, and the same with us. And then that would take care of the deficit plan. What this means, though, is come November, we're going to be right back in the same boat. And the townships say they're aware of that, and they will pay, their share of that cost. But this will clear the deficit plan, which is our immediate need. Having a deficit plan, not having a deficit plan could impact our bond rating, could impact our financial condition. So while we originally thought the other way, it was going to be one way or the other, both were going to have to be used, both mechanisms. We are in agreement now that we should go ahead and use this money and take care of the deficit.
Dennis, is it my understanding the Board of Public Works has already taken action on this and has voted to use the settlement money to clear the differential?
I believe that's true. They did it in terms of the business plan that they adopted, and that's what the townships are focusing on. Their business plan says the money that's received in any settlement will be used to offset the debt, and that's how they've decided to support that. So yes, they have.
Okay, all right. So what do you need from us?
Well, our recommendation would be to authorize us to file a deficit plan and use whatever's necessary out of the $725,000 settlement to pay the shortfall.
So moved.
Support. Motion by Inman, supported by Fleece, to pass the deficit elimination plan as outlined on page 57 in our packet. Is there any further discussion? Herb?
Yeah, I have a real problem with this. I think that, we're taking all the funds that we currently have and just putting them onto deficit reduction, and it leaves us a zero balance. And within, 4 months, we're going to go back to the townships and tell them that they owe us money again. Why would we give them back money and then have them write a check back to us? Well, I mean, that just, and besides that, you're taking all of your,
Sorry.
This just doesn't make sense.
Well, I agree with you, and in fact, that was a position that Dean and I took until we received a deficit plan, until we were required to file a deficit plan. Lending money from units of government to take care of a debt is not an acceptable deficit plan.
Yeah.
No, that's why we don't want to do it. If the townships lend us money and we lend money, according to the state, and I think they're absolutely right, that's not taking care of the deficit, that's just making a loan in a different place. If we were to all take the shortfall and appropriate money that didn't require repayment, that would be an acceptable deficit plan. So by using money that came in from the settlement, we are actually appropriating money to take care of the deficit, and that otherwise it's like using a credit card to pay off a bill that you have. It's still a deficit, it's still something you owe. So it really does make sense, sir. I totally agree with you. Logically, we wanted to do it the other way, but this is the way it has to be done. We're going to be back in the same boat a year from now.
Less than a year.
We're going to have to figure out, well, it'll be when the audit's done next June or July, we're going to be in the same boat.
But who's making the payment in November?
We are.
Why
No,
can't
I
we
mean,
just
'cause-
raise our debt limit,
Yeah, we don't have any debt now.
like the feds did?
Excuse me, as soon as we do this, there is no debt.
That's
And we're not
correct.
going to loan any more money.
No,
I mean,
it's-
it could come from our board that could say, we're done. We don't want to loan any more money to this, and we're not going to do that. So where are they going to be if we decide to do that? I think they're really not looking at down the road that there could be a vote from this group that says, we're not willing to lend any more money.
I believe the resolution that's on the book says that you will continue to
50-50
do a 50/50
50-50,
share
okay.
on this through 2000 and, I think it's through
13.
2012 or 13.
So the bonds are callable.
Now, that's a resolution, you can change your intent, you certainly can.
But the question,
Well, we may have a resolution to share the cost 50/50, but as we can clearly see, two townships have not chosen to participate.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, although I certainly don't know the legal aspects of this, but as far as I'm concerned, there is no agreement.
I would take exception to that comment. The rationale behind the two townships is that they brought forward to the Board of Public Works that business plan that clearly stated that they would use that any funds coming in from any source would be used first. So their question is, you either have to amend the business plan to not accept the $725,000 for the repayment of the shortfall, or allow it to go through. And that was their issue. They didn't have a problem cutting the check and sending it over. Their issue was, are we following the business plan or aren't we following the business plan? If we're not going to follow the business plan, then we're going to file an amended business plan that will allow what we're doing.
So I also noticed that Mr. Thomas voted against this. Could you explain why?
Because I didn't want all that, what was it, 720, yeah. I would have rather seen them cover part of it this year and part of it next year. For one reason, and another reason is because the other two townships didn't pay.
I guess, he's got his hand up.
Ross?
Dennis, do we have recent numbers on, like numbers for the end of July and what kind of revenue the plant has generated?
It's up a little bit.
The monthly total was up. I talked to Ross about it 2 days ago, but the deficit that we're facing is still very much the same. It's still in the $400,000 range. Only made up a small portion of what we lost from Bay Harbor.
Is the revenue covering the operating expense?
I can't answer that, Commissioner. I apologize for Dean not being here, but I can have that answer for you next week.
Well, my only comment is that when, of course, I did vote against the settlement, but I also expressed the opinion that I thought the settlement should be used for, long-range, maintenance and, future capital improvements, which were sure to come. I will vote for this, but with the full understanding that all we're doing is kicking this down the road a few months, and we still have not resolved the problem.
I agree.
Jason? To address the concern about whether or not the townships wish to participate, could we not, as a part of our deficit reduction plan, do half and then have them share half? In other words, and that then carries through, and really, it keeps them participating, and then through the next cycle, it's then again half at the same time.
The problem is that technically, in order to solve or to resolve the deficit to resolve the deficit plan, we cannot do it through a loan mechanism. We have to do it with an appropriation. So if you have them still put money in, they are not going to, unless everyone agrees that we're going to start putting money in here as an annual appropriation, then there would be no deficit problem. But as long as it's a loan, it will always show as a deficit. So the only way to resolve that is by paying it off through this fund or telling everybody, you're going to put your cash in, you're not getting it back.
Well, that's the idea, though.
Yeah, well,
That would be the
could-
idea.
See, right now, the whole premise of this is we're putting cash in and someday we're going to get it back. And that's the only way the townships agreed to do it.
Correct.
So, yes, I mean, the cleanest way to do this would be to say, we're joint owners, we're going to put in whatever appropriation we need to run this place, and when we start making a profit, we're going to share the profit. That would be the appropriate way, the best way to do that. But politically, that's not anything that I've heard anybody say they're willing to do.
Well, I think you need to also note the second paragraph in this letter. Your deficit elimination plan is due within 30 days from the date of this letter, which was July 14th. So we have till August 14th to submit a plan, or they will recommend 25% of our state shared revenue be withheld.
The good news about that is
We don't give it.
I'm more worried about our bond rating, our financial position.
I am too. I'm more worried about making sure that we've created.
So there's a silver
Or
lining in everything.
maybe we'd attract an emergency financial manager with a big fund.
Mr. Chairman, what's revenue sharing?
Well, it's one of those things I remember from a long time ago. Larry?
Well, I guess I would like to go back and get some distinction as to our previous audits, as to, all along here for the last several years, we've been making advances. We have called them advances. I don't know if we call them appropriations or advances. And as the Bay Harbor money was coming in and those kinds of things, they were eventually paying us back. That never got noted, in my understanding in the audit, as a deficit problem or issue. So I guess the technical question I would like to have staff address is that did we change CPA firms in the interim of this thing, that they have a different interpretation of this thing?
No.
All right. So
Yes, we did change CPA firms. Dean and I have talked about this, and we believe that this was just overlooked by the state.
All right.
It's been reported the same way every year.
All right.
And it's just been overlooked, and
So I think what we need...
Now it isn't.
I think what we need to do is we need to go back and say, okay, this is if how it's termed, or how, the process that we're using to work with the township needs to be done in a different grammatical way, then we need to know that, like, we're making an appropriation, and then the townships will reimburse that appropriation or whatever, rather than calling it a loan or some other type of factor.
we'd be glad to get that.
And I think you need to review that with our CPAs.
I'm pretty sure when you make an appropriation, you can't expect that appropriation to be repaid.
That's
And
correct.
I'm not in a position to be contributing money to this facility without an anticipation of being
Yeah,
repaid.
that's absolutely correct. The only difference is if you're an owner, and it's an enterprise fund, and there's a profit down the road.
I'm not an owner. There's 5 townships that are
I
owners.
understand. If you are, though, in an agreement where you become an owner, and there is a profit at the end, you do, and it's an enterprise fund, you can take the profit from that.
Yeah, I just wanted, I'd like to see if we if we can get an opinion from our CPA firm as to how to properly disclose this relationship in terms of if advances are possible, and so we can avoid this deficit issue.
We'll do that.
If there's a different process we could use, but it accomplishes the goal of what we're trying to do.
Pass the deficit elimination plan is outlined in there as well.
Yes, we will do that.
Chris?
Well, now that the state has found this, clearly, we are going to be looked at again next year.
Absolutely.
And I would like Commissioner Thomas to take back to the Board of Public Works my distress at the idea of what are we going to do next year? I mean, we obviously can't make a loan. It's not considered, the way I'm reading this, it's not considered legal. Am I misunderstanding this?
No, I think you have it exactly right, but I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to tell you.
Make the
They're
loan?
gonna- No, they're going to tell you, and they're going to tell you collectively, we had a solution of a special assessment, and you said no. We had a solution of a 2-cent increase in the fee, and you said no. This is what they're going to tell you. This is
They
what they
have
tell me.
never, to my knowledge, have they ever suggested a special assessment, the Board of Public Works?
Oh, they've talked about
sure
it
they
a
have.
lot.
Oh, yeah.
They've talked, but has there ever been a motion passed where they
Well,
say...
Beth made one in the committee that reviewed the recommendation of the Board of
But the
Public
Board
Works.
of Public Works
The Board
has
never-
not
The Board of
said,
Public
No.
Works agreed not to make the special assessment.
that's what I'm
not
saying.
our direction.
The Board of, well,
Well, based on our based
See,
on
that,
our
I think that's the
feedback.
key. There are a couple of issues out there that, and when I talk to the township supervisor, and you should too, I'm sure you do, that's what they tell me. You say you don't want a deficit, but then when we come up with a plan to raise more money, you say no.
I didn't say no.
Now, I'm talking about the board.
I hear you.
And that's what they tell me. And so that's what they're saying. So they're saying, this is the best we can come up with. We share this debt. So, and there's good reasons for doing that, but that's what the answer is going to be, Commissioner.
Well, they're going to have to do something
We have to do
next year.
something.
They're going to have to.
All right, we have a motion on the floor in a second. Is there further discussion in regard to the passing the resolution as outlined on page 57? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same.
Aye.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yep.
Richardson?
Yes.
Lemkool?
Yes.
Henschel?
Yes.
Inman?
Yep.
Gilman?
Yep.
Please?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
No.
Chairman Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am. Motion carries. Was there anything else in your report, Dennis?
Oh, Commissioner called me today to ask me if I could kind of update and reiterate what the numbers were in the budget. And so we'll tell you that and please understand, these numbers change daily. Every time we meet with a department, the revenues change, But when we started this process a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at an estimated revenue of $36,859,191. And this year's revenue, that's next year, this year's revenue was $38,669,089. So that's about $1.8 million less next year than this year in terms of revenue. The budget requests came in at $40,816,899. So we had about $3,957,000 to cut out of the budget to balance the budget. Typically, we have two and a half. So this is quite a bit larger, which explains the bags under my
Yes.
eyes and if I'm a little bit, short with
Testy.
you, that's
Yeah.
part of the reason
You're
why.
always short with me.
Ross?
Dennis, in the 1.8 million drop, I understanding these are all estimated numbers, what's the biggest component of the drop from this year to next year in revenue?
Taxes are going down. We budget them conservatively, as you asked us to. Taxes are going down roughly $850,000, tax collections. We don't have a handle yet on what's going to happen with personal property, although in my discussions with Lori, even though there were something or the order of, I won't even tell you a number, millions and millions of dollars, we're not finding a lot of actual implementation of it by the townships.
Imagine that.
So the collections, we don't know whether they'll be there or not.
How many cats are in the county?
A buck a cat, boy, we'd be making
Yeah.
millions.
So that's the biggest thing. And when you look at the $4 million deficit, it may be coincidence, but it's just interesting that the $4 million deficit equates roughly to the $2.2 million in tax revenue we've lost and the $1.8 million in interest that we've lost over the last 4 years. It's roughly the same. We were making, there at one time in 2007, I want to say we made $1,900,000 in interest. And this year we're hoping to make $250,000. And next year Bill says we're going to be right at that same level. And so that's where we're at number-wise. And Dean and I are whittling away at that, but we still have quite a ways to go. And We have to have the budget to you 2 weeks from tonight, so. And for those, the survey is done. The results have been compiled. I got the first draft of the survey we did on SurveyMonkey, and I just got the draft of it today. Hope to bring that to you next week, so you have the survey information. I'm still waiting for a commissioner or two on the priorities, and I'm supposed to have that to you next week, but I got to have it from commissioners if I'm going to put the rest of it together. I have compiled what the 7 of you that turned them in said, and so I have that information. But actually, you know, I want to reiterate, there are tools to use when you get kind of in a corner, but they're certainly not scientific. But you know what? They've come out pretty consistent. You know, they look pretty good. So I'm actually pretty pleased with it for a first go-round, so. But you know, I would like to, when Dean and I get down to that last week, and we start looking at what programs we're going to cut, things we're going to cut, I really want to be able to look at what you said were lower priorities. And so I kind of need that help. That, I know, enough said. And then the other thing, and I haven't gotten to talk to the chairman about this much, you know, I hope you will have a discussion in the next week or two about what you want to do, how you want to conduct your budget hearings. And part of the reason that I raised this, and the chairman and I have not had a chance to talk, so I haven't gotten a lot of his input on this yet. Typically what we do in a normal year is we say to all of you, after we give you the budget, give us a list of all the departments you want to meet with. And then we ask all the departments, do you want to meet with the county board? And if either of those are true, all those departments come and meet with you. One of the things that I talked to a couple of you about is another way to look at this, because this is a different process, might be to say, let's look at everything that fell in that lowest priority category by the 9 county commissioners. Everything that got a 1.5 or less. And instead of meeting with all the departments, let's bring in all the programs that had a low ranking. And let's just set all the papers on the table and let's just focus on programs in this budget hearing, because those are the ones that evidently have a low priority, and base some decisions on those programs that had lowest priority by you. I don't know. I've heard from commissioners. Some commissioners are totally fine with the system we've been using, but I've heard frustration from other commissioners that there's not enough time to really get into the programs and talk about that. So this would be a way to focus on programs. You may have a better idea, and you know, I think you need to have an opportunity to talk about that, because I just think doing something a little different might be useful this year in terms of trying to balance this. You know, we'll have it balanced, but I'm pretty sure it won't be in a way that you're real satisfied with. I'm sure you're going to want to put your stamp on it, so we need to figure out what's the best way to help you do that.
I'm probably a long ways from a rubber stamp, but at least from my perspective, you know, I would like to look at what services we're providing, whether you call them programs or what. That's the way I want to evaluate what we're spending our money on. You know,
and you've been pretty consistent.
Rather than individual
Commissioners
budgets.
have been pretty consistent from what I can tell. And, I mean, what one commissioner ranked as a low priority, it seems many of you ranked the same things. So that was pretty consistent. I was surprised, actually, to see that.
All right, if that's all from Dennis, we have no unfinished business, we have no new business. Brings us the second opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make comment at this time? Seeing none, Commissioner committee reports. Chris?
Had the Commission on Aging meeting this week, and I want to announce to everyone that the Traverse City Senior Center is going to have Camp 911. It's going to be Tuesday, August 23rd at 9 a.m. There is a charge. The admission charge is $3, but lunch is included. They are doing something new this year. MSU Extension is going to come and do a car fit for seniors. And I told this story at Commission on Aging, and everyone kind of laughed, but it's a true story. A friend of mine has elderly parents, and he got in, he's the same size as his dad, he got in the driver's seat, and he went to back the car up, and he looked in his rear view mirrors, and then he looked over in the passenger side rear view mirror, and he said, "Dad," he said, "you can't see out of the passenger side rear view mirror." And he said, "Oh, that's Mother's mirror." So this CarFit program is new this year. The senior center is going to be adding it several times a year. There will be a limit of 200 people for Camp 911, and the number to call to register is 922-4911, 922-4911. And I also would like to report that Senior Day at Northwest Michigan Fair, where seniors are free, is Monday, August 8th. That's it.
Jason?
And I had the pleasure of going to the American Legion Junior Baseball Awards, and they sent me with something for each of the commissioners. It's a dog tag that reads "Winning with Honor," and wanted me to give each of the commissioners.
Very good.
Of course, I have to tangle them up here.
We'll send our thank you to
For helping
Oh,
them
nice.
get back in the game, so to
Oh, they're
speak.
nice.
extend our thank yous.
Thank you.
That gets something else, and I
You
can
gave
wear
one
the top of my name
for
tag.
Dennis.
Won't fit.
It's because you got a fat head, but we won't go into that.
Well, there's not,
There's a
won't
snap
fit
on
me
it.
either, so.
Chip chain.
In any
Yeah, it's really. Freedom's got it.
as you all might know, they had, in the season, they had just under 500, and they're expecting, the next season, they're expecting probably 530, 540
Wow, that's
kids to participate. And the event, by the way, it was incredibly hot, and as you can see, one side of my face, the sun was on this side. But it was a good time. They had good food and everything, so.
Further comments?
Yeah, I just want everybody to know that Saturday, August 13th, the fire station number 12 is going to have an open house. This is at the Silver Lake Recreation Area. Garfield Township will also be, I think, having an open house at the same time. A hose coupling or hose uncoupling ceremony will be held at 1 o'clock on that day. So rather than a ribbon cutting, it's a hose uncoupling. And we're really proud of this station. It's a beautiful station, and it is already starting to make an impact on response times for people around in our area. So I would encourage everybody to be there. It starts at 11 and goes until 3. So just to let you know, hope to see everybody there.
Any further comments?
And the barbecue, or no?
Yeah, well, I noticed this, just, I guess, the only other announcement that I would make, Chris mentioned the fair. Don't forget that one of the things this board committed to for 5 years is for MSU Extension is the 4-H program. And this is where the 4-Hers really, truly have an opportunity to show what they do all year long is at the fair. So, you know, take a few minutes, go out, walk around the barns. You know, they got almost all of the barns have been rebuilt in the last few years. They actually have concrete sidewalks down through most of them, so you get less on your feet. And not to say you don't get any on your feet, but you get less. So, you know, just, you know, we've made the commitment to support MSU Extension for 5 years for basic services, and 4-H is one of those places. Take a minute, go look. And the 4-H auction's on Thursday. If you choose to purchase an animal, you know, you're welcome to do that. If you're not available to go and you still want to participate in purchasing an animal, let me know. I can find somebody to take care of that for you.
You know, and in addition to what Sonny's saying, on Thursday, the day of the auction, if the child brings an animal in and it's 1 pound underweight, we'll say, or more, they don't allow that animal to go through the auction. So here's a child that has worked hard all year to go to the fair, and because he's a pound or 5 pounds shy, not allowed to participate. And what they do is, in the pens, they put up a listing, and it's a silent bid. You walk up, you write in what you're willing to bid. And Last year, I think I bought one animal. The previous year, I bought 3 because you go in there and you look at them children, and it's really makes them smile, and it shows them that we, the community, like Sonny said, back 4-H and the kids.
You know, I've mentioned before, and I kind of forgot about it again, you know, I would love sometime to do the wellness barbecue with a 4-H hog and a pig roast.
Ooh, I'd love it.
I absolutely
Wow,
would
that'd be
do
something
that,
different.
you know, and I'm sure it wouldn't cost us any more money.
You'd take care of cooking?
I can handle that hands down. I've done it before this summer
It
already.
would stop us from flipping burgers, it would just rotate and we'd be done.
Okay?
I will be glad to take that to the wellness team.
I would love to do it.
Yeah, there's no fat on
Okay.
pig.
Yeah,
Any
really.
other notice? The Wellness Barbecue on August 19th. Commissioners, make sure you've submitted your stuff. Joint meeting with the
We
tribal council.
may be short on people, so, because some people said they weren't going to be able to be there.
I can't
So,
make it
I
till
can't
about 12:30 or so, or 1.
so some, if we can get people there early, that would be much appreciated, so, because that's really where most of the burgers and the brats are cooked in the beginning of that, so, you know, that's when we really need your help as much as we can, so.
Okay. Joint Tribal Council meeting on August 24th, 1 to 3, and that is at the Tribal
Shelbytown.
Council Center at Shelbytown. Now, is that the one on Sullivan?
22?
We'll send directions for everybody, but yep, it's right there on 22. It's the last.
It's right where the tribal courthouse was.
Yeah, yeah.
We're gonna carpool out?
I would imagine that makes sense.
Budget hearings, September 7th, September 9th, September 14th, and 15th. Put those in your calendar. I don't think we're going to get done in 2 nights, guys, so you
No,
might as well
so either.
put all 4 dates in there. The Michigan Association of County Conference at Grand Traverse Resort, September 18th and 20th. I don't know if everyone's registered, if they haven't registered.
I think Katie sent something around a day or two ago.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's in my email that I haven't read yet. Okay, no need for a closed session?
No.
Can we have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Don? Thank you, everyone.